the one machine that I can say that I've added to my practice, the one piece of technology that I never felt like was a bad mistake was InBody. It just has been invaluable. And some people really take they don't understand how to use it, or they don't realize what it does for them. These patients love their InBody scans. We have that built into our fees. We never charge for it. It's just that's you're a patient of mine, and I want that to just be something that we use in our practice. I've built it into my cost of doing business. It can make your life so much easier if you're in a hormone practice, having an InBody, calming those patients down, making them understand that their weight gain is okay. So I'm passionate about my InBody. I love my InBody. I'm excited about things. We're having our new blood pressure machine that's going to integrate with InBody. We're now going to hook up our strength, our grip strength added to that. That's going to, from my understanding, going to print out on the InBody sheet as well. So, now you're telling me about this awesome nutritional app that can, work with InBody. There's Panoe out there that can work with InBody, which for people that don't know, that's VO2 max testing. I just think that the future is bright in longevity medicine, and these are just tools that make our day easier and better.
Welcome to Beyond the Scale. I'm your host, Bradley Davey. This podcast exists to educate and empower the next generation of healthcare providers. We're here to share powerful tips, tricks, tools, and insights to help you catalyze growth with the application of InBody's ecosystem of health assessment tools. Today, my guest is Dr. Kris Wusterhausen. He's a board-certified family physician. He's certified in age management medicine. He's the founder of the Research Clinic in Weatherford, Texas, and passionate about helping patients optimize their health and improve physical and mental states. He's a global lecturer and loves teaching patients and providers about wellness, hormones, peptides, and in 2022, he became the medical director of the Biote Training Center in Texas and helps hundreds of providers understand hormone replacement annually. He also has his own podcast where he covers a wide range of health topics, helping his patients and fellow providers live happier and healthier lives. Welcome to Beyond the Scale, Dr. Kris. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Bradley. Nice intro. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Okay, so podcasts are pretty popular these days, and some of our listeners might even have their own, and we're on one here. So I noticed that you have 84 episodes on your podcast, and I was curious if you have any insights to share that might help others improve theirs, or how it might fit into their business model that they may be offering.
Yeah, so we created our podcast originally. I created it as a tool for just educating my own patients. And I like to always tell my patients on the initial visit that I may not have enough time to cover every topic that I think is important. So many times I'll give them homework. I'll be like, hey, I want you to listen to this podcast and that podcast. And then I encourage them to, like, hey, maybe also go to this person's podcast. I think that, I do that as well. I learn from other podcasts. So that's how we started it. It was an educational tool, and it really still is. That's our primary focus. But the biggest thing I would tell people who want a podcast is it's so easy to do these days, which is cool. That's awesome. Like, anybody can really be a podcaster, but just talk about things that you're passionate about. People will feel it if you're not passionate about what you're discussing. So you want to be passionate about it, and be okay with screwing up. Like, don't be fearful of it. Just get on a podcast and talk. If you're not doing them live, you don't like it, then delete it and start over. Sometimes that happens, right? And so just be okay with that. Talk about what you love and you have a passion for. I think that's where a lot of people do so well with podcasts, is they're talking about interesting subjects that they really, really care about. Like, I have a wide array of podcasts that I listen to. They're not all medical. Like, I listen to all kinds of things. I'm a sports nut. So, like, one of my favorite things is, after a long day, is just listen to a sports podcast on the way home, something that's mindless, but, keeps me entertained. Like, I hardly even listen to the radio anymore. It's all podcast and that sort of thing. So just be passionate and give it a shot if you want to do it. What's the worst that can happen, right?
Yeah, and I think a great way to add value to your patients or customers' lives if they're not able to spend as much time for you, or maybe even it's a way where you can find new customers through that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a decent amount of our new customers because every time I go into a new patient room, I ask, "How did you find us?" Mainly because I want to, A, if I have one customer sending in 50 patients, I want to reward them somehow for doing that. B, I want to see if my marketing's doing anything, and C, to see where these patients are coming from. And I'm always blown away by how many people are like, "Oh, I found you via your podcast." I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And that's the other thing I would say is don't be upset when your podcast gets very few downloads from the start. Like most of us don't start with 300 downloads in a day. It starts with one maybe or two. I've had weeks where I had zero or one, and it's okay. Like, you put all this effort into something and nobody listens. There's no doubt I am by far a great podcaster, but I know I'm a much better podcaster today than I was 3 or 4 years ago. I listened back to some of my early podcasts. Actually, it's kind of funny. We're going back and redoing some topics because I'm like, I could have done better. B, you get new knowledge. And I do always tell my patients what I say today, I may not say tomorrow because if I see a study or if I learn from somebody something better, we're going to implement it. But we just become better podcasters. We become better people. Hopefully, we're all becoming better at what we do for a living and just living life every day. And I think when you podcast, that'll kind of show through. So I have a moderator, and he always just said, "Doc, we got to get 30, 40 of these under our belts." And we joked that we just started season 5, I think is what we're into now, which is our 5th year, starting our 5th year. And he's like, "I just feel like we're starting to get the groove." And I'm like, "Yeah, I feel the same way." So just experience, and but yeah, it brings us new patients, and also it helps with retention of patients. And patients now come in with their own topics from our podcast, which is really cool. We really love that.
Tell me more about your philosophy of care and what you're doing at the research clinic for your patients.
Yeah, so I always tell patients when they ask, basically the research clinic started with patient zero was myself. When I came into medicine pretty young, I was in my late 20s when I graduated residency, and I was overall healthy. And then I saw myself very quickly, even despite exercising and what I thought was good nutrition. Looking back, I didn't exercise properly, and I damn sure didn't eat very well, but I thought I did. And I started to gain weight, and I actually was up to 35% body fat, and I didn't feel good. And my buddies, my other local doctors that I went and saw, they couldn't really help me. And it just started this journey for myself of learning a different way of treating patients. And so we always say here, we like to mold alternative medicine with traditional medicine. We're not anti-traditional medicine at the research clinic, but we embrace alternative medicine as well. And we're just into root cause medicine. We like try to find out what the real cause of the problem is and treat that cause. Like a great example is a lady going through menopause who may come to your office not complaining of menopause, but may come to your office complaining of depression. And is she depressed because she just has neurotransmitter imbalances, or is she depressed because her hormones are depleted? Like let's just think this through a little bit more, because if we could fix the hormones, you might actually fix this patient. So we just try to do that with our patients. We try to go with root cause medicine. We try to do that through hormones and peptides and small molecules and exercise and nutrition. And our practice really focuses on healthy patients trying to be healthier patients is really what we do here.
You've had an InBody for quite some time now. I believe since InBody first came to the US and it merged in the marketplace, and you've even upgraded your InBody since then. Tell me more about what that experience has been like for you and what kind of impact has it had on your practice?
No, it's had a tremendous impact. And so, our practice here at the research clinic, we do a lot of what we call metabolism, a metabolism clinic or weight loss clinic. Again, I like, I've told you that off the record, I like the term metabolism clinic because we're not always trying to lose weight. Sometimes we're trying to just change body composition, gain muscle mass, things like that. So I like the term metabolism clinic. And, our first device was InBody via GE, I guess is the best way to say it. And then we upgraded that to the InBody 570 a few years ago. And, we loved our first device. We love even more our InBody 570 because there's a couple other a few extra bells and whistles. I think actually I talked to you first and said it was still, by the way, that machine was still working fine. And I still have it. It's actually my backup machine. And you actually said, Doc, if that machine breaks, we don't have a single part for that thing. It's antiquated. It's done for. But, damn thing's like a workhorse. It's never broken. It's been fine. But, you have to have, if you're truly going to treat hormone patients, metabolism, weight loss patients, you really need to have some true way of doing accurate, consistent, and replicatable body composition measurements, right? Like you can't just use a simple stand on the scale and let's use that. We all know that tapes and calipers just aren't very consistent, accurate. I always tell the story, I don't think I've told you this, that one time I was at the gym, this was years ago, and my trainer's like, let me check your body fat. And they did calipers on me, and then she leaves and she tells me what my body fat is. And I saw another trainer there doing it, saying, hey, do you mind checking me? And all of a sudden in 3 minutes, I had a 3.5% body fat difference, and it's not an accurate way to test, right? I always say it's not horrible, it's just not real accurate. So, InBody is just such a great machine. It doesn't take, like the 570 doesn't take up a big floor space. In my opinion, it's affordable, and, it just works. It's just part of our program. We wouldn't know what to do without it.
Yeah, GE originally brought the InBody into their ecosystem when they were selling DEXA scans because they're the devices because you can't do a DEXA every week, every other month, and
Sure.
they wanted to get these body composition values alongside of that, so they would sell them as a pair together. One of the things I heard you say that I really liked was you define yourself as a metabolism clinic. And when I think of just, the root of life sometimes is metabolism, it's what enables us to, continue to grow and our cells to thrive. And there's a lot of different outputs on the result sheet where we can see that. But in particular, one of the ones, the ECW TBW score, where we're looking at how much extracellular water is within the total water, kind of alludes to the efficiency of somebody's metabolism and the way that the water is flowing through the body. What kind of experience have you had with that output, and has it grown over time as you've continued to see that in your patients alongside of the therapies you provide?
Yeah, so the ECW TBW, or we call it the edema ratio, is in our office is really something that we become using more and more recently in our practice. We've come to really embrace that ratio because we notice that when that ratio gets higher, many times these patients are inflamed. And I'll go back and talk about a patient so I gave a big lecture at Peptide World Congress a couple of weeks ago in Vegas, which I got to see some of your counterparts there. And my lecture was based on patients that have quit losing weight. I would love to say that every patient I see progressively, consistently loses weight till we get the goal and life is great. But that's just not the way it goes. And we see a lot of these patients, though, when they stop, it's because they are inflamed. They're stressed and they're inflamed. And there's certainly lab markers we can look at, like one of the most common one is cortisol. That's a great one to look at. But we can also look at this ECW TBW ratio and know that as we improve that ratio, we're actually improving metabolism. We're lowering inflammation. Sometimes the number will actually come down and then it jumps back up, and you start talking to these patients. And I always joke, I say it in my lectures all the time. Most of the time, the patients will tell on themselves very quickly, like, hey, I think you're more inflamed. What's going on? Oh yeah, I went on vacation. I haven't been. I can't lie. I have been eating very good for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Been drinking a little bit more than I should. Oh, by the way, I stopped my supplements you had me on for gut inflammation. I ran out, whatever. I had that happen today. And so it can be a very invaluable number to look at. And as we talked about, you can also kind of use that number and sometimes in hormone replacement patients, especially when you put patients on. So I'm a pelleter, as you kind of alluded to. I work with Biote, which is a bioidentical hormone replacement therapy company that we use subcutaneous pellets. I would say 90% of my hormone patients are on pellets. We will see some of those patients early on having an increase in their extracellular water. And as I tell patients or all the time or other providers, you rarely have a happy female when they gain weight unless they truly understand where that weight is going. And so I'll be able to use the InBody to show them that their body fat mass has not increased. It's just, their extracellular water has gone up, or their in really positive scenarios, their skeletal muscle mass has gone up, with maybe testosterone usage. So you can use that ratio in multiple different ways. And I would just encourage anybody that either has or is going to buy an InBody to really spend the time to understand the report. Because you can easily in 3 minutes, and that's another thing I like about the report is it's really easy to understand, right? Like it's not a complex report. I deal with some devices or lab tests, and it's like, oh my God, like you need a PhD just to understand this report. Like there's one company, remain nameless, they have a great lab, but learning how to interpret it, I've interpreted many of them, I still don't completely understand it. And I'm like, I was talking to the founder, I'm like, you have got to come up with a way that makes this report more relatable to the average person, because not every provider is going to spend 40 man hours learning how to read a report. They want something that they can figure it out pretty easily. Then the patient has to be able to look at it, because we give all of our reports to our patients. They need to be able, within reason, to look at a few things and understand those metrics fairly easily. Like I love the fact on, how y'all put the body fat mass and lean body mass up in the top right corner of, if you need to gain muscle or lose fat. Like that's a really relatable number to patients. Like, oh, if I want to be very normal, this is how much fat I need to lose, or this is how much muscle I need to gain. I think that's a underutilized number that I always train my providers on. Just look at that. You can take 4 or 5 little small things from this report and make really big impacts with your patients for sure.
We have an InBody Academy now where it takes about 30 to 40 minutes to go through it for any device. And it's going to cover everything from how to prepare to run the test, understand the result sheets, and leave you with a lot of other resources to help you learn a lot of these different things. And we've expanded to add podcasts like this where you can learn from providers with a lot of experience in the marketplace with the product. You mentioned lab testing and values, and I've heard before some people have been able to relate the body composition values to lab testing metrics, or in some cases be able to kind of, see the body composition values change and equate that to a lab testing value. It's not a diagnostic tool in that sense, but have you seen any type of comparison values to the lab testing with the body composition?
Sure, there's a lot of correlation there. And, I have a saying that I tell providers is that if I had to choose one of two patients, hypothetically, one is a patient that I have no idea what they look like, but their labs overall are good, labs that I deem to be good. And then I have what I would deem to be a perfect InBody, a low visceral fat, great skeletal muscle mass, a lower body fat. I'll take that hypothetical great InBody scan patient all day long, because it is rare to never that I see a patient with a fabulous InBody, unless they're doing it through truly artificial means. Okay, what I mean is using like lots of anabolics or something like that, that their InBody that's really good doesn't correlate to really healthy labs. Because the truth is that very few of us can have, I'm really big into like looking at inflammation. It's very unrealistic for a person to have lots of inflammation and metabolically be healthy. Those two things just don't go together. They don't go hand in hand. If you're not metabolically healthy, it's very unlikely your body composition is good. And so that's just where that's kind of where I come up with that analogy with patients. Of course, we want both, right? We want to see great labs and great InBody, but we usually get that. And as your labs improve, it's also amazing how usually your InBody improves. They just kind of go hand in hand as you see these cortisol levels coming down, as you see, maybe C-reactive protein or ESR, whatever you like to check with your patients, uric acid. When you start to check these things, you start to see them coming down at the same time you're seeing that InBody normalize as well. And as I've told you, I'm just a huge believer in low visceral fat. And so that's probably what I like most about the InBody 570 is because that's what I did not have with my old machine is I didn't have a visceral fat measurement. And then when you get it, it's kind of like getting a new car with like a really cool tool. You're like, God, how did I go without that? Having that visceral fat measurement, because here's another thing I'll throw at you. Some people's body fat's not bad, but their visceral fat is far from optimal, right? I always say like those are patients I have to work and most people say something like 12 to 20% for male body fat is normal. Some of those patients you really have to work down to that 10, 11, 12, 13% to get that visceral fat down, where another guy may be 19% body fat, but it's not viscerally located. And that may be okay for that person. So I tell my patients all the time when I'm working with them on my metabolism clinic, we're going for a healthy InBody scan first, vanity second. So I'm okay with vanity, but vanity never is what we're going for with my patients. I'm going for a healthy InBody scan first. So I always say we go for health. And then if there's still some meat left on the bone, pardon the bad pun, then we'll go for vanity second. And that's just, looking better, feeling better. Because the truth is 99% of your patients care about one thing. Maybe not 99. Let's say 80% care about one thing. Looking better, feeling better. They're not really so much concerned about they're not as concerned about health as much as you are. They want to just look in the mirror and feel good about what they look at. I always say, I want to get both of those. I want you to be happy when you look in the mirror, and I want to be happy with your scans and your labs. So we can accomplish both health and vanity at the same time.
You mentioned visceral fat being an important marker. How do you usually define that to your patients, and does it relate to inflammation in the body at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that higher visceral fat is linked to multiple cancers. It's linked to diabetes, strokes, heart attacks. Everything that's really bad starts, in my opinion, in the body with visceral fat. And visceral fat is a sign of inflammation, right? Like, if you get that guy with that big old belly that comes in, he's inflamed. There's just no doubt about it. You're not going to check that guy. Here's one of my pet peeves. My primary care said my labs are great. And I'm like, no offense meant, your primary care probably checked hardly any labs on you. They probably did the basics of basics, which, by the way, I'm not throwing darts there. I was a truly traditional primary care medicine doctor. I cringe at how little I used to check. Didn't know any better. It's was the standard, still is the standard. The visceral fat measurements technically, like on the InBody, 10 or less is normal. We strive for 7 or less in our practice, but really where I like for my patients to be is 6 or less. And the reason I say that is I want less than 8. The problem with 7 is we're right beside 8. We have a bad week or two, we're back at 8. So I always say if we're at 4, 5, or 6, I feel like that's a maintainable visceral fat. Those 1s, 2s, and 3s are really hard to maintain unless you're just a super athlete. I really deal with kind of 30 to 70-year-old patients. So I like to go with stuff that I feel is maintainable. I do not personally believe a guy at a visceral fat is 2 is really healthier than a guy of visceral fat of 4. It's just that guy's probably either a little better genetically or watches their diet a little closer. That's great. It's like saying I've got a body fat of 8. I'm like, cool, good for you. I'm not going to say that's better than a guy of a body fat of 12.5 as long as that visceral fat is good. So yeah, I think visceral fat's crucial. And again, just making sure you get that number down and where it needs to be. And that's one of the unique things about the InBody 570 and up is you get that visceral fat measurement.
So there's a lot of ways that we can think about the muscle in the body and even see the intracellular water values. And we even have an SMI score where it's a skeletal muscle index. thinking about the appendicular lean mass and whether we have enough of that. And you once told me that muscle is the currency of aging. So tell me a little bit more about how you're helping your patients related to their muscle. What kind of things are you expressing to them that's important?
There is no doubt, and the first time I heard that term was when I'm faculty for SSRP, which is Dr. Seed's organization, who's had a major impact in my career. And I believe it was Dr. Yurth, who has an amazing practice up in Boulder, Colorado, BLI, Boulder Longevity Institute, amazing provider. And she had this term, muscle is the currency of aging. And all of us faculty members have kind of stolen that from her, but I always try to give her credit because I believe she's the one that actually came up with it. And, because as we age, there will, if we live long enough, even you as a young man, Bradley, if you live long enough, there will become a point in time where your body starts to steal muscle. There's just no one that lives to be 110 who's gaining muscle mass all through their lifespan, right? And what you don't want to become is a sarcopenic patient. That's the medical term, as you know, for low muscle mass. So we want to stay away from sarcopenia. And I also have another thing I tell patients is that it's very rare that you have low muscle mass or good muscle mass, and brittle bones. Really, I believe losing bone density starts more at the muscular layer, okay? And so if we can keep our muscle mass, we're better off. And now we even know that it's not just muscle mass, it's strength. Which is why I'm excited to be adding the grip strength tool to my InBody 570, because now we realize, because there's people out there that have good muscle mass, but they're weak. They're not strong. And that's important that we now know that strength is probably the bigger thing than muscle, but of course strength goes along with muscle, right? Like you're not going to have no muscle and be strong. So we're all about measuring skeletal muscle mass. Like you said, the measurement tool that you guys have is the SMI is really important, because most of us don't believe in BMIs anymore, right? Body mass indexes, because my BMI is like 27. So, it's telling me I'm overweight, right? And I'm far from it. I always tell the story. I was in the military. I was former Air Force. And there was a moment in time that I had to kick a guy out of the Air Force because his BMI was too high. So the Air Force, I don't know if they still do, but their measurement of fitness was a 1.5 mile run, how many push-ups and sit-ups you could do, and your waist measurement and your BMI. And unfortunately, the sit-ups and push-ups didn't count for much. And this guy was a big dude, a big, strong, muscular guy whose BMI was high. He couldn't run that fast, but I guarantee you, if you were in a battle, this is the guy you wanted in your foxhole. And yet, this is the way we looked at these things with BMI and waist measurements and things of that nature, even though today, if you would have embodied him, he would have been a rock star, right? And so eventually we had to kick him out because he couldn't run fast enough and these sorts of things. And so the BMI is always just, from that day, is always just stuck in my craw because it's just such a bogus measurement. What does it mean? I mean, what's your body composition? And so this machine is great because one of the things we do a lot of GLP-1s in our practice, glucagon-like peptide-1 agonists, semaglutide, tirzepatide, Ozempic, Mounjaro. And you know what those do, but not everybody does. They're products that, control your appetite and make you feel full longer and affect cravings and actually metabolically improve your body. But there's this mantra that I hear all the time that GLP-1s cause muscle loss. GLP-1s do not cause muscle loss. Your diet causes muscle loss. The GLP-1's cutting down your appetite, but you, Bradley, if you're on a GLP-1, are choosing what to put in your mouth, and it's the lack of protein and amino acids that cause you to lose muscle mass. So one of the most common things that we use the InBody 570 for is monitoring these patients on GLP-1s. And so when they come back, I can see if they're getting enough protein intake or not. If they're now, I will say this, if they lose a little muscle mass on one visit, it's a month visit and they lost 1/2 pound of muscle, I'm not freaking out about that because this is a little bit of a variable number. Sometimes hydration will play a little bit of role on it. Sometimes they scan in the afternoon and last time they scan in the morning. Those are variabilities that we know can happen. But when you consistently see over 3 months, man, they're losing a pound, pound and a half every month on muscle mass. We need to have an intervention there. Heck, there's been times where I stopped GLP-1s because I'm like, man, despite all my education, you're just not eating right. Because what I always say, some patients with GLP-1s just use it as an opportunity to eat less. It's not just an opportunity to eat less, it's an opportunity to eat better and less. And so we still have to make sure we get our protein intake. And so that's what I tell prescribers of GLP-1s. InBody is an invaluable tool to truly objectively, not subjectively, objectively measure that muscle mass to make sure that we're not losing, because we got to remember that muscle is the currency of aging, and we need to stockpile as much as we can like a chipmunk, okay? Because one day we're going to start pulling money out of that account, and we need that account to be a fat account, just like we want our retirement account to look like, so that we can live to be 98 and not be that frail little old man or lady that a gust of wind blows them over and they break their hip. So that's basically why I tell my patients we care about muscle so much, and why we use the InBody to measure that.
Speaking of protein and macronutrients and objective measurements, the InBody is a great way to track that progress. And we have an integration with a company called LifeBase Solutions, and they've got a macro tracking app that your patients could use to input all the food that they're eating. And on the back end, you get a dashboard where you can see meal by meal, day by day, exactly what they're eating. And the system will help automatically coach and score each meal and keep them on track. So if you're ever looking for some way to objectively measure food and integrate that, they've taken the body composition data from the InBody and it goes directly into the LifeBase solution. And they use in real time the weight, muscle, body fat, and the water values, the intra and extracellular water, to continue to alter the diet to help them get to their goal.
You know, I don't know if it was you or if it was one of your colleagues at Peptide World Congress that told me about that. And we haven't integrated that into our practice, but I want to look into it. And that's really invaluable. And then I think you also have some sort of an affiliation with Pinoe as well. And I just think there's so many cool ways that you can use these devices. And it's also cool now that we're getting these different companies with these apps and things that are actually playing together, and are playing nicely in the sandbox together, because you all complement each other. And it actually, I was just on a call with Pinoe this week, and it's really cool now to start seeing how you can use these devices together versus, because I will tell you, one of the issues InBody, I think, is maybe the easiest to understand how to integrate it into your practice. Okay. I personally think it's pretty easy. We've always embraced it from day one. But I can tell you, I can't tell how many times I've bought things and then because my wife always says, she's my office manager, I fall in love with stuff at a conference, because you guys do an amazing job. I say you guys, I mean salespeople in these fields, and they catch us when we're all hyped up and they sell us a device. And then you get it home and you're like, shoot, how am I going to actually implement this, right? Because something that maybe makes sense in my brain doesn't, because most of the time these devices aren't being used by me, they're being used by my ancillary staff, and they don't get it quite as much always. And so I think that it's always important, and now I'm kind of going off on a tangent, not only does a provider need to know how to understand these reports, but your staff needs to know how to understand it too, because let's be honest, a lot of this education is given by my assistants. They're like, hey, my main assistant's name is Inez. Hey, Inez, what do you think about my scan? And it doesn't look good if she goes, well, I don't know. I don't know how to read these scans. She can at least give her some basic, you know what, actually, I think he's going to be really happy with it because this is better and this looks like this. And so I just think it's really cool where this is going. I think that, that program with nutrition and macros and things like that is really cool. I actually want to look into that for our own clinic. I think that's a really exciting thing that y'all have added there. And just the more ways that you can engage your patients, it's just, it shows them value. And as I always say, like, I have a provider that says, why should I add an InBody to my practice? Well, all the things I've already said, right? Like, you need a real way of tracking things. I need something that's accurate, something I believe in, something that has a good track record like InBody does. It's cool. Anytime I go to a conference or I talk to somebody like, what do you use? It's like 85% of the time it's InBody. People just believe in InBody, like me. It's got name brand recognition, which I think is awesome. But now that you have something like you just talked about, that just makes your practice stand out from the guy down the road. And so I made in my last talk at Peptide World Congress. First of all, I'm just going to tell you, by 2030, they're estimating that there will be over 4 billion obese patients on this earth. 4 billion with a B obese patients. We feel like now everybody does weight loss, at least in my practice, with the GLP-1s really being everywhere. The crazy part is we're not even making a small hail dent on your car effect on obesity in the world. But with that being said, with more providers doing things like weight loss, whether they're doing it right or wrong isn't the point. These things like what you just talked about, like having an InBody, having this program that shows your patient that you are not only forward thinking, but you're standing out from the clinic down the road. Because I guarantee you, a lot of practices, like, we don't have it right now, but we want to talk about adding it. That's just another way to make my practice stand out compared to the guy or girl down the road.
Another thing that we have included is our InBody Academy, where this is a 30-40 minute course. When you get the device, you get unlimited access to this. So if you have 100 staff members, everybody can set up their own self-paced course. They can learn how to run a test, prepare to run the test, understand the result sheets, and that can help bring up the level of awareness and education of all your staff so everybody's on board when you bring in the tool. Because like you said, we do find you when you're excited, and people really like the device, but bringing it back, sometimes there can be some hurdles with implementation. So we're definitely here to help with that. And we even have content like this from people that are using the product.
You and I started our relationship just me buying a machine from you, okay? You didn't know me, I didn't know you, and our relationship just has grown from there. And my point of that is I've always thought the customer service with InBody is amazing. I've never had any major issues. The couple of little issues we had with devices were very quickly and promptly taken care of. That was back when we didn't have a relationship. You're just like, hey, okay, we're going to get this fixed or whatever, or here, do this. I've just found the company to be really awesome, and I can't tell you how frustrating it is when you pay good money for a machine, and then 2 years down the road you've got a new employee, and you need to get them trained, and they want to charge you money to train that person, especially when it's like, just give them access to it. So I like the fact that InBody doesn't try to nickel and dime their customer. You want to treat your customers right, because you know that if I'm happy, I'm going to send my buddy to you to buy a machine, and that's how you make your money, versus trying to nickel and dime me for every little thing. And so I have not found InBody to be a company that milks things. They have a good quality product for a fair price, and the machines, like I told you, that my old one still works. I just upgraded it because I wanted the visceral fat measurements, and you said, by the way, doc, if that ever breaks, it's literally obsolete, but it still works. We have it at one of our ancillary clinics just for some quick measurements, so it's not a bad machine. That sucker's damn near 20 years old and still working.
I want to give you an opportunity to talk about a couple companies that you've mentioned here, where you're the medical director of training at the Texas location for Biote. Then you've also talked about SSRP. So tell me about those two organizations and your involvement in those.
Yeah, so Biote was a company I was associated with first, and Biote, basically the name says it all. It's bioidentical testosterone estradiol replacement, and we mainly specialize on subcutaneous pellet therapy. Biote is the only publicly traded hormone company in the United States. They've been publicly traded for a couple of years. And I think it's an amazing organization. We have over 8,000 providers now, and we're still growing at a rapid rate. And I run the training clinic for Biote in Irving, which is their headquarters. It was started in Irving. We have a few locations through the United States, but I run that training clinic, which simply means any doctor, nurse practitioner, PA that comes through that training clinic must come through my clinic before they're certified. So we've been doing that for quite a while. And then I'm also faculty for SSRP. So I'm faculty for Biote, but I'm also faculty for SSRP. That stands for Seed Scientific Research and Performance. And our founder, the amazingly talented and brilliant Dr. William Seeds, I've told people I've had two doctors that have had major impacts in my career. The first one was Dr. Paul Thompson, who got me into hormone replacement therapy. And then Dr. William Seeds. I heard him lecture, fell in love with how he does things, and I've been a groupie ever since. And I was what's lucky enough, I guess is what I would say, to be chosen as one of our few faculty members that we have for SSRP. And we travel around the world trying to educate providers on usage of peptides in longevity medicine. And we just had our Peptide World Congress, which is where I saw your colleagues out in Vegas. We had a sold out event at the Bellagio, over 600 providers that got rave reviews. So yeah, those are the two organizations that I'm mostly associated with.
One thing that I want to understand a little bit better, because I know there are other pellet manufacturers out there, and I also hear this related to the GLP-1s, but the quality and the consistency of those things can vary among them. Why did you choose Biote? And then when you think about the GLP-1s too that you're using in your practice, do those differ similarly in the quality and consistency?
The reason I'm with Biote is I like the fact that they're publicly traded, that their scrutiny that Biote is under by the FDA is tremendous, and that will give me as a provider the knowledge base that the quality, the just the replicative sourcing is amazing with the pellets. I actually left Biote for a short period of time. I used a competitor that remained nameless, and I very quickly, my patients actually with the first one started telling me, like, I don't feel the same. I don't feel as good. It was kind of my first understanding that just because something is compounded doesn't mean it's the same. Just like cars, there's different manufacturers of cars, there's different compounders out there. And maybe that doesn't matter on certain things, like if I'm compounding a low dose steroid cream, maybe that doesn't really matter how the quality is, but it matters when it's a hormone that I'm putting under the skin. And the reason that I chose Biote is I like being in a group of providers that are like-minded. I like the fact that their education, which I always say is a shameless plug because I'm part of it, but I think their education is exemplary and it's getting better. And I like the fact that the quality and the assurance that I know that my pellets are good and they're safe, because not all pellets are made the same. Now, as far as compounded peptides go, because GLP-1s are peptides, if people don't understand that, those are peptides. I mainly use one pharmacy, and that's New BioAge out of Florida. I'm a huge advocate of New BioAge. Leonard Pastrana is one of the co-founders of New Bio, and he and I are actually co-lecturers many of the times. We actually shared the stage in Mexico. Heck, you were at Mexico. And so we shared the stage there talking about metabolism. And I know that whatever Leonard produces is the highest quality because I have an old saying that most of the time when something is cheap, there's a reason why it's cheap. I'm one of those believers that if I'm going to do a repair on my house and I get 4 bids and one is ridiculously cheap, I got to really look at that and say, what's wrong with this bid? Something seems unusual there. Same way with compounds. We get every day, not every day, but 2 or 3 times a week, we'll have patients come into our office saying that, what do you charge? We tell them, they're like, oh, I can go down the street and get it for X amount. And my wife who runs my practice will tell them, like, sometimes that amount is less than what we pay just for the product. That's before, because every one of my patients gets an InBody scan. They get an extensive nutrition and exercise counseling. They get my time and products. We're like, we can't even buy our product for that. But those patients wonder why they're not getting results. Gosh, now I can't be on social media for more than about 15 minutes before I get some ad from some mail order company wanting to sell me semaglutide. It's just, so just know your quality, research it, ask if you're a patient, where is this coming from? And maybe do your own research. Go Google that pharmacy, see what you think about it. I'm offered every single day via email a cheaper source of GLP-1s, and I refuse to bend on the quality of these products because this is my reputation. These are my patients. I will not allow them to put things in their body that I'm unsure about.
And in the marketplace too, a lot of patients that want these GLP-1s are coming to your shop and saying, hey, I can get it cheaper somewhere else. How do you differentiate yourself in the marketplace and try to define the value that you provide? Or do you allow them to, go out and have a poor experience or get a cheaper quality product somewhere?
Yeah, my wife says it best. So most of these patients don't make it to me, right? I'm not the one at the front desk going over prices or anything like that. They're always talking to my staff, and my wife generally is who they're talking to, or one of my other employees. And we just make the point that we know we're not the cheapest in town, nor will we ever be. We're actually probably the most expensive. We actually embrace that. We're like, hey, we're probably the most expensive. Here's why. Here's what you're getting with our program. Go back and ask these other people what they're getting for that program. Most likely you're getting a 5-minute visit with a bottle of semaglutide, and that's what you're getting. And that is it. For us, you're getting every visit 30 to 45 minutes, extensive counseling. And they also say, our physician, myself, is spent, and by the way, I lecture a lot. I still spent over $40,000 last year on my own education. That was actually what I spent on my own learning from others. And so I always tell patients, like, it's my job to go out and find the coolest, the best stuff out there and bring it back to you. But that does come with a price. We're not doing, we love what we do, but we're not doing this to not make money as well. We have to make enough money to stay in business because I'm not independently wealthy enough to just work for free. And so we have to make an amount. Here's the good news. There is not a shortage. If somebody's listening to this as a provider and thinking about doing this, do it the right way. Patients are willing to pay for a service within reason if they see the value in it. That's the whole thing. Like, providers are willing to buy an InBody for what you want them to buy it for, as long as they see the value in the service. If they don't see a value in the service, they're not going to pay it. And that's how I look at things. If I roll up onto the Mercedes-Benz dealership lot and I want to go look at a brand new S-Class, I know it's going to be expensive, but I'm choosing that because that's what I want with whatever. You don't roll into Gucci to buy a purse and not expect it to be expensive, but you're wanting a specific kind of quality or brand or whatever that is. The good news is we get most of our patients from our patients. I would say 85% of our new patients come from other patients, and they know what we do is worth it. So at the end of the day, that's what I tell providers is know what your worth is and, work backwards from that. That's how we calculate prices in our office. What do I think I should make per minute, and then calculate backwards off of that. And I think that's a good way of doing it. And what I'm worth and maybe what Dr. Seeds is worth are not even in the same atmosphere, stratosphere. But believe what you're worth and stick with it. I'm very passionate about what InBody adds to a practice. And I see so many providers that try to get into metabolism or hormones or other parts of their practice, and they're afraid of spending a little bit of money. And I've just, one of the things that I'm passionate about is helping other providers not make the same mistakes that I made. I swear, and I've actually thought about this, I think I could write a book about things to avoid when starting a practice like this. I think I could save every doctor $500,000 right off the bat of not going down. I probably honestly have wasted $500,000 in my life of going down things that were not fruitful. Now that's over 15 years, and a lot of it was on the front side of it. The one machine that I can say that I've added to my practice, the one piece of technology that I never felt like was a bad mistake was InBody. It just has been invaluable, and some people really take they don't understand how to use it, or they don't realize what it does for them. These patients love their InBody scans. We personally don't try to monetize InBody personally. I know that some clinics, I'm not knocking it, they charge X amount per InBody. We have that built into our fees. We never charge for it. It's just you're a patient of mine, and I want that to just be something that we use in our practice. I've built it into my cost of doing business. I've never charged a sole amount for an InBody scan, because it's just part of my doing business. But I just think it's invaluable. It can make your life so much easier if you're in a hormone practice, having an InBody, calming those patients down, making them understand that their weight gain is okay. So I'm passionate about my InBody. I love my InBody. I'm excited about things. I just got my tracking on Tuesday. We're having our new blood pressure machine that's going to integrate with InBody. We're now going to hook up our strength, our grip strength added to that. That's going to, from my understanding, going to print out on the InBody sheet as well. So, now you're telling me about this awesome nutritional app that can, work with InBody. There's Panoe out there that can work with InBody, which for people that don't know, that's VO2 max testing. I just think that the future is bright in longevity medicine, and these are just tools that make our day easier and better.
Yeah, you're going to have the whole ecosystem pretty soon set up with the blood pressure monitor, the body composition, the grip strength, and like you said, that all integrates into the software and the app as well. So we're certainly grateful that you're here and you're willing to spend your time here to share your insights. And if anybody's interested in getting an InBody and you want to learn more, then we've got a special landing page for anybody that comes through Biote. So that would be learn.inbodyusa.com/Biote. So we'll have a special offer for you guys there. And then if you want to connect or learn more from Dr. Kris, the resurgeclinic.com. Resurge is RESURGE, Resurge Clinic. Or you could go to drkris.life, where he's got all his podcasts there, where he's sharing his passion too. Anywhere else you wanna send people?
No, just remember the drkris.life is with a K. So drkris.life. Or you can just go to Apple Podcast and type in Dr. Kris, one word. It'll come up there as well if you're an Apple person, if you want to listen to any of the podcasts. So we're not selling anything on our podcast. We're just educating.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.